All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Relish the Journey. And this is a very special episode because today I'm joined by our first international guest, which is very exciting. He is joining us from across the pond, as they say, from southern England. And we met on this website called Matchmaker, which is not romantic, even though that name might suggest it. It's a website for podcasters to get guests and for guests to seek out podcasts. And he messaged me with his 3 words to that question I ask everybody. We started a dialogue, and now here we are talking. So, Paul, I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really glad you explained all about the Matchmaker service, that it's not a dating service.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you're a nice guy, but I am married, so we'll just keep this as a friendship.
Okay, that's cool.
So, Paul, we were talking before we hit record about how this is going to be fun for both of us because me in the United States and you in England, even though we're going to talk about similar topics that are, similar to the human experience, we're going to have unique perspectives from the different countries that we're from. So I'm looking forward to getting more into your story. I'll just start by asking you the question I normally ask at the end. I ask everybody here to describe their life in 3 words. And so your 3 words would be?
Adversity into action.
All right. So I will shut up and let you talk now. Why don't you tell us what you mean by that? Why are your 3 words adversity into action?
Okay, so where do I start on this? Right, when I talk about adversity into action, what I'm talking about is when you have those life-defining moments where you've experienced some form of adversity and you've dealt with that and moved forward by turning that adversity into action.
Got it. So in your life, you've had a lot of adversity, is it fair to say?
A few incidents, shall we say.
Okay.
So, I mean, I always like to start at the beginning, I think. It's really, we've just been discussing off air about, the school system in the US compared to the school system in the UK. And it's fairly similar. Here when you're sort of 4 or 5 years of age, you go to what we call an infant school or primary school. In my day, it was an infant school moving into a junior school when you hit sort of 8 to 10. And then depending on where you are in the UK, you may end up with what you call a middle school or move second to what we call a secondary school. And from then on, you decide whether you're going to go to college and maybe university, etc. afterwards. So most people will go to, through the stream of probably 4 schools. But because one of my parents was in the services and then they divorced and split up, I ended up going to 12 different schools.
Wow. Yeah, so twice or 3 times that of the normal person. Yeah.
And that really kind of bred a few areas of adversity in that it's okay moving schools, but if you move halfway through the year or part way through the year, you really stand out, don't you?
You do, yeah. I had that experience when I was in the 3rd grade. So for us, I guess that would be called your primary school, right? For me, that was elementary school. We moved from New Jersey to Pennsylvania in the middle of the year, and yeah, you are the new kid, and you're kind of taken from that comfort bubble. You know everybody. You have an identity built around who you are in your friend group, and now you're dropped where you don't know anybody, and that's scary for a kid. I mean, it's scary for anybody, but definitely in those formative years, it's a lot to process.
Absolutely. It is a lot. And then, but if you do that multiple times, you never sort of enter into those friendship groups full on,
Sure.
because after a few times, you're thinking, well, is there a point of moving into a friendship group here? Because, I could be moving anytime soon.
Right.
And you never really sort of fully commit to those relationship groups. You get involved naturally, organically, but then you're upping and moving again. And you can't really, depends on the distance you're traveling, can't maintain those friendship groups because there was no internet when I was at school.
Right.
So, there's no way you're going to maintain those relationships. So, but also the other challenge that come with doing that sort of thing is you stand out and you have some people you will gel with and other people think, well, we'll see who this is and try and test them out, and the bullies come to the fore and that sort of thing. So you have to learn to deal with those, and you start to learn communication strategies and tactics so that you can avoid those type of people or you can better manage them as you go along on your day. But I do remember that by moving schools, that the curriculum was different in different schools. They'd be maybe a little bit further ahead in maths and English compared to the school you were at. So there's a gap in your knowledge. Or you move to a school where they're a little bit behind and you're advanced and you're having to be slowed down because you're going at the pace of the new school. Or on one particular occasion, and don't laugh at this, Miles, I remember going into a class for Latin, and the teacher was speaking in Latin, and everybody was busy doing what they were doing, and I just sat there and had no clue what was going on.
Wow.
I'd never been in a class for Latin, and the teacher came to me and says, "Why aren't you doing the work?" I said, "I have no idea what's going on, I'm afraid." And he says, "Well, why not?" And I said, "Well, we just arrived," sort of thing. He said, "You've done no Latin at all?" I said, "No." He said, "They're in their second year." He said, You're no good for this class. Go and find an extra English class or something."
Wow.
And that was it, But it was so daunting at the time. And I remember thinking, what is going on?
Right.
Not a clue.
Yeah, and I didn't have that Latin example for me, but I remember I ended up retreating into myself a little bit. Sort of like what you said, when you don't go all into the friend groups. I would go all in, but then I just found myself being self-sufficient, and I would just spend a lot of time quiet and in thought, and didn't really kind of get into the social scene of school. Like, I didn't really worry about that. I was just focusing on my schoolwork and a few extracurriculars and maybe in sports, but I was really the quiet one after that move. And before the move, I was like Mr. Popular. I was outgoing. I had all the friends, and I just sort of switched because I didn't know how to do it again. Did you have that similar experience at all?
Yeah, because nobody teaches you how to do it, do they?
Yeah, you just do it when you're a little kid, and now you're forced to start over, and you have no idea how.
Yeah, and I remember moving from one school to an all boys school, and there was 1,800 boys in the school.
Wow.
And I was probably 11, 12 at the time, and that was so different to what I was used to, and predominantly most of the teachers were male as well, so it was a very male environment, and the sport was full on. It was great. Don't get me wrong. The sport was really good, but it was just such a male environment. And I remember going home one day, and I had my bag with all my gear, and I was just with a few other kids as well. We weren't sort of friends because I'd only been there a few days, but they sort of walked towards the bus area with me, and a couple of bigger boys grabbed me and then tossed me around and took my bag and threw everything on the ground and everything. And I was just an absolute wreck on the floor, And I thought, well, I'm never going to let that happen to me again. And there's two parts to this. One happened was, and I shouldn't have done this at the time, but I did. I always remember, just one of those things when you're young. I saw the boys walk down a corridor once, on their own, one at a time. And I waited around the doorway for where they were, just about to walk. And I swung my bag as hard as I could straight at them. And they went down. One went down, and then I waited, and I did it to the second one when I found the opportunity to do it with him. And I thought, well, he went down. Unfortunately, the deputy head teacher was watching on the second occasion. So he called us into the office, and then he heard the story. Then he called the other boy into the office as well and heard the story. And he said, "Look, I can't condone what you've done." He said, "But I understand what you've done, and you two were, you were out of order. So you're all going to get a detention. And you're all going to go and I think we cleaned the gymnasium or something like that, but all three together." I've never forgotten that because it was my act of revenge at the time. But I thought, well, I shouldn't really have to do that, but I did. And then I started taking martial arts classes. And that's when I decided to do that, to learn to defend myself, but also give me the confidence and maybe some respect from others and my peers as well.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to ask, so how you turned that adversity into action. So it sounds like that was it. You turned to martial arts. That was your action.
Yes, it was, because in those days, Bruce Lee was very popular, and karate in the UK was extremely popular. So I just went along to those classes, and I really enjoyed it. That was really a start of an adventure for me, because I really stayed with the martial arts until I was about 34.
Oh, wow.
So, that was, I did the karate, I did Aikido, jiu-jitsu, and some other areas as well that we can mention later. But that really showed me those moves, continuous moves, about learning about communication, learning how to cope and manage the adversity that you're presented with, even if it's not of your own choosing, when you're placed in a new environment. And when I've spoken to people and I've worked with people in my professional life, then some people who have moved from job to job, or in their job have moved from establishment to establishment, they've also found difficulties similar to what I experienced when I was a youngster. So I always remember if anybody was new that came into my place of work, I'd always welcome them and say hello and get to know them a bit and introduce them to other people so that they didn't experience what I experienced.
Right.
And I always made a real point of doing that. And, I think it helps people a lot.
Yeah, it's a great point. I never thought of it that way. That feeling of, that first day of school, for me, it was that feeling of the first day of school. You walk into the cafeteria and you don't know who anybody is or if your friends are there or where you should sit. And it's just sort of that little panic inside of everybody seems to belong but me. That
Yep.
I never thought of it that way as an adult, that people would feel that walking into a new job. But that's a great parallel to draw.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. I mean, even if they're moved from one location to another, even in the same job, but they just don't know the people. And let's face it, it's the people that are the important part, isn't it? You may know the role and what to do, or you may not, but it's the people. You need to make contact with them, be socialized with them, and you need to know who's who in the pecking order, etc., in the organization.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So I'm curious, your experience as a child with moving through the education system and multiple schools. I see in your bio here that you're a former educational leader. Is that what brought you to choose education as a career?
No, not at all. Absolutely, no, it didn't. No, not at all. That was by accident.
Okay.
No, the last school I ended up in was an inner city school in, and you'll probably know this place, Nottingham.
Okay.
Robin Hood country, and being an inner city school, the only occupations available for you when you left were over the road. We had two factories, one that made bicycles and one made cigarettes, or go and work in the mines. And I didn't want to do any of those things. So I had a relative who'd been in the services. So I joined the military. I joined the Royal Marines. So as soon as I was able to, that was it. I was gone, out of the city and on an adventure. And that's what I wanted to do. And that's what I pursued. So the training was tough. It was rigorous. It was adventurous. It was exciting, exhilarating, all those things and more. And it really was. But I was going home on leave one day, and at the railway station there was a delay, and I got talking to a couple of military policemen. They were telling me what their role entailed, and the different avenues of specialisms that you could enter into in the Royal Military Police, and I was quite interested because intellectually it was challenging as well, because you had to learn about civilian law and military law and everything else, in addition to the normal military things.
Sure.
And I'd already got the background from being in the Marines from the military things. So I thought, well, that's interesting. So they took my name and my details, and I said, look, if you're interested, contact us. So I thought about it a little bit. Then about 3 months later, I got somebody contacting me and said, look, are you really interested? Because we can arrange an interview and an assessment. So I thought, well, nothing to lose. I'll go. And I decided to transition. I went to join the Royal Military Police, and I had a really great time there. I ended up serving in Germany, in Canada, and I've been to Norway and various other places, and had a really good time. But I was always, because of the fitness and from the martial arts point of view, I was always into sport and fitness. And I became the unit PE physical education instructor in the unit to keep everybody fit, keep them on their toes, sort of thing. And we dealt with the what we would call over here control and restraints, which is like self-defense and arresting techniques and all those sort of things, which with a martial arts background was pretty suitable.
Yeah.
And I loved it. But then came a point where we had a child at that point, and we thought, well, moving every 2 years. And this is the difference. I'm not sure what it's like in the States, but here with most regiments in the military, you would move with the whole regiment. So all your colleagues are with you, and all their wives and kids and all move en masse with you to wherever you're posted. But as a Royal Military Policeman, you would move every 2 years on your own to a unit.
Interesting.
So you would then have to get to know everybody in the unit. You may know 2 or 3 people, which is fine, but then you have to get to know everything yourself.
Right. It's that childhood school experience all over again.
Funny enough, yes, it is. Yeah. So I thought, well, I really wouldn't want this for my kids because I've been through that already. So I decided to come out into civilian life. But there was a job I came across in the Home Office here in the UK, which was a physical education officer. So I applied for that and did the training, which was absolutely out of this world. And I think we left with about 8 or 9 different sports and activity coaching qualifications. From British Amateur Weightlifting Association instructors to swimming teacher, kayak instructor, basketball, rugby, you name it, volleyball, the whole gambit.
Wow. And so over there, you have to get certified in each specific sport to be a teacher of it?
Yeah. In that particular role, yes, because that role enabled me then, because I worked for the Home Office, and you had to be flexible. So at one point, I could be working on a young offender institute, helping out, because if they're in the last part of their sentence, they go out on outward bound courses and rehabilitation courses, and it could be taking a mountaineering or kayaking and doing adventure pursuits and that sort of thing, or doing sports in their institution, or working in a maximum security, doing weightlifting with the inmates, or doing self-defense with the staff, or working with the police for riot training, or working with vulnerable women for self-defense. There was a whole gambit of different roles within that, and you had to be qualified to go into any of those places.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
So, and hence the training,
Right. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I don't know if there's something like that over here in the United States. When I think of a physical education instructor, it's just a little bit different connotation over here. So it's just interesting how much schooling you had and certifications. That's neat.
Yeah, it was good. It was really, and of course, this was all done at national sports centres. So here we have places like Home Pierpoint, which is the National Water Sports Centre for kayaking, sailing, rowing, etc., doing the gymnastics and the other fitness elements. A lot of it was done in a place called Relish, where the British gymnastics squad are, the British squads for cricket, the School of Excellence for soccer, everything's there. So we lived in these places to get to train and get our qualifications, and it was just a brilliant experience.
Yeah, it sounds it.
Yeah. So I did that for 10 years. That was my grounding in coaching, because that's what I do today. I'm a future mindset coach, but that was my real grounding in coaching, because very often when people hear you've done a lot of sports coaching, they think you're just teaching the sporting discipline, but not everybody turns up every day ready for training in a motivated mindset. They may have got problems with their boyfriend, girlfriend, or financial problems, or housing problems, or health issues, or whatever,
right?
Or dynamic issues with other people in the team dynamics, So as a coach, you teach the discipline, but you also have to deal with all these personal sides of things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was a competitive swimmer all through college.
Yeah.
So I started at 8 years old, doing it in the summers, and then all the way up through college. And there are definite days I did not want to be there. And there is a huge mental aspect to any sort of physical activity, because the body follows the mind, really. So I totally agree with that point.
And what did your coach do to get you motivated when you weren't motivated?
No, it depended on the coach. I had a few coaches. Some some love to yell and scream and wave their hands vigorously all over the place to try to get you, and others would take more of a mentoring mindset, and come alongside you, put an arm around you, and take an interest in what's actually going on in your life.
Yeah.
And what's behind that feeling that you have or thought you have, and how does he help you fix it, or she help you fix it? So I had a full spectrum. I never really responded too well to the people that just yelled for the sake of yelling. I don't think many people do.
No, I've never seen the point in it, but there you go. They do it obviously for some reason, maybe it's for themselves, I don't know. Yeah. But rarely have I seen it work. So, but anyway, that was where I ended up working, and of course that was involving teaching and coaching for 10 years. So I was doing that. But one day during that 10 years, I went home and sat on the sofa, and I went to get up, and the left leg just went to sleep. And I thought, oh, okay. When you go to sleep at night, Miles, maybe you put your arms under the pillow, and you wake up and they've gone to sleep, and you got that pins and needle type feeling.
Oh yeah, I hate that feeling.
A little bit like that, but in the leg. I thought, strange. And then I went to the bathroom, and that didn't function either. So I thought I'd better call a doctor. And I spoke to my local doctor, and he says, "Don't worry," he says, "but I'll send you an ambulance. It'll be with you in 10 minutes." Yeah. What do you mean, don't worry?
Don't worry, but I'm sending an ambulance. Interesting.
So they did, and that night they operated on me for a herniated disc.
Oh wow!
And I had no prior warning, and it just went, and that was it. And I was off work for about 6 months with rehabilitation, and I returned to work. And the only thing I didn't do, which I thought was pretty sensible, was not play rugby. I coached rugby, but I didn't play it. But I participated in everything else, which was fine. And it was a very simple recovery. It was this has happened, had the operation, this is your rehabilitation plan. And I just followed the plan to the letter, and that was it. I was back at work. So although it sounds like a bit of adversity, it really wasn't that much. I mean, goes through your mind. You thought, why has this happened? What have I done wrong? Have I done anything wrong? And they just said, look, it can just go. It can just be your particular body. It just goes. No particular reason. So I said, fine. And I went off, went back to work.
Yeah, and I'm
and
sure
then
I'm sure for somebody that's not in as good a physical condition as you were to start, it could be a bigger adversity.
absolutely.
I'm sure you bounced back because you're already an active person. You cultivated that strong mindset, the athletic mindset, and then your body was athletic too. So if somebody's not that, then I could see that being the start of a downward spiral for some.
And it can be, because like 4 years later, I was leaving a building and there was a couple of us, and I slipped on a wet floor with the other person. There was no signs out that had been recently cleaned and left quite wet. And we literally turned a corner and the floor was just, that was it. We slipped. And I got up okay, and so did my colleague and that. But then I felt my back. I thought, that's a bit strange. Feels a bit strange. And the same disc had herniated again.
Oh man!
In exactly the same site. And I lasted sort of a few weeks, and before it really went bad. And they just said, look, we've got no option but to operate here. And the orthopedic surgeons didn't want to touch it because it was in exactly the same site as the last one, and that's where all the scar tissue was from that. And they said, look, there's potential of nerve damage here, so we're going to send you to see a neurosurgeon in another hospital. And they did that, and he said to me, look, there is a risk, he said, here of, damaging the nerves. He said, I can't guarantee we won't. He said, because we've got to get through that scar tissue to get to the disc. So anyway, they did the operation, and when I came back there, I had no feeling from the knee down on the left leg. And that was it. The service medically retired me because I just couldn't continue. And that was, like you said, I was really fit, really had that mindset of fitness and sport and everything else that goes with that. And then all of a sudden, that's gone.
Yeah, that had to be really hard. That's your whole identity, is this guy that is all about all these different types of sports. You're performing them, you're coaching them, and now you can't move part of one of your leg.
No, and they had no prognosis. I was on elbow crutches for short distances and a wheelchair for long distances, and they just said, I went to see the surgeon on the appointment. He said, look, you just got to get used to life like this. He said, because we can't really do anything about this. And no, this is not going to happen. I'm going to get through this. He said, well, good luck. He said, but we can't do anything. So anyway, I tried to storm out of his office on my elbow crutches, which is difficult. You can't really do that. But no, I was absolutely destroyed with that. And I had a period of like, well, why you ask why me, or why is this happening? But then that mindset kicks in and that attitude kicks in, and I'm not sure whether that's the resilience from being a youngster and a kid, or being in the military, or having that sporting mindset, that fitness mindset. But that kicked in anyway, and I just said, okay, can't do that anymore. What am I going to do now? And that has always been the way I've thought, is something happens, something blocks your way, something puts a stop to what you're doing. So okay, what am I going to do now? And in this instance, I signed up to re-educate. I went back to college. We have different levels of college prior to university here. And I thought, well, I'll sign up and do a business and marketing course, a diploma in business and marketing. And I remember one of the local advisors came round, a disability advisor, and she said to me, well, it's unfortunate, but you just get used. Most people just get used to their situation, and for a couple of years, and then decide what they're going to do. I said, "What do you mean a couple of years? I can't do nothing for a couple of years. I've never done nothing ever, and I'm not about to start now." She said, "Oh no, you got to hold on." I said, "Well, I mean, this was on a Thursday, and I remember I said, look, I start college on Monday. I've signed up." She said, "No, you can't do that." I said, "I'm doing it. That's what I'm doing. I'm going on Monday."
Right. Well, that's awesome. That's like the one law of physics, right? That an object in motion stays in motion, and it's the same for people. If you just sat around for years doing nothing, then it's hard to get that momentum back again. So it's good on you for starting right away. It had to be hard.
And I always say to people these days that if you do face adversity, one of the things you've got to do in order to move forward is find purpose. And the purpose for me there was to re-educate, do something I've never done before. I did business and marketing. I had no idea where it would lead me, but it gave me purpose. And that enabled me to get up every morning, feel bright, it was considerably painful at the time, but I still got through that, and I managed to go to all the classes. I don't think I ever missed anything. I just wanted to get there and do this. And I remember there was one class there called Business Decision Maths, and I hadn't done maths since I was at school, really, on any high level. And I went to the class, and I thought, wow, this is really, it's out there. It's a lot of algebraic equations. And I said, look, I'm not a physicist here. I'm just doing a business course.
Right.
He said, no, this is what we use. I said,
it's almost like they were speaking Latin to you again, huh?
Oh yeah. So I thought, I said to the guy, I said, well, how can I improve my level? Because I want to do well with this. He said, there's a class every Thursday in the library, and there's somebody there that can help you. So I went along to every one of those classes there, and I flew on my last test of that 2-year course. I got 100%, and I was really pleased. So also, one of the things about finding purpose is that enables you to be, it's okay finding purpose, but you have to take action. And that's the next step through here. And this is like a common theme that I've discovered through my life is, okay, adversity, deal with it, find out what your purpose is, but then you need to take that action, like signing up for the classes, finding out the extra maths teacher, etc. And because that will help you move forward in life. And I've always had that view from that particular course. My grades were sufficient enough for me, thankfully, that it enabled me to go on to university then to do a business management degree. And that was great. I went from where I came from, the last school I went to, nobody in that school would have gone and done a degree. Straight from there to college and university. So I was really pleased that I managed to do that. But that only came out of my adversity. Out of that adversity came this. I turned it into action, and we ended up with that.
Sure.
That's the advice I give people these days is, turn that adversity into action and see what comes.
And it's interesting how if you follow that path all the way back to when you were in school, right? If you hadn't moved around a whole bunch and had to deal with that adversity of being the new kid in school, you wouldn't have, and those bullies coming after you, right? You wouldn't have taken the action to sign up for karate, which probably would have led you in a different path, but you ended up then following yours in the service and in physical education, and then that made it so that you could recover quickly from the herniated disc, and then the dominoes just keep falling. So yeah, it's interesting when you can play the hindsight's 2020 game and look back and see all the different ripple effects of how one seemingly off the cuff decision years and years ago started you on the path that you're on today. Yeah.
And for people that I work with now, very often, somebody might have heard me speak like this. I've done a few interviews, and they would say, well, what was that point of decision to move forward? And I really haven't been able to pinpoint it, but it just seemed within me that was the thing to do. There was no sort of catalyst there, that little light bulb moment, that eureka moment. I remember lying on my back, looking at a computer. What can I do now? Okay, re-educate. Okay, let's see what courses are available within the area I'm in, so I don't have to travel too far, and that I would find interesting and challenging at the same time. And that was my only criteria, and that's how I found what I found.
Sure.
But that, like I said, gave me my purpose.
Yeah, it's like the thought never even entered your mind to stop and quit. It was just over time you developed that iron mind of, you'll find a way.
Yep, and you do. But then I did the degree, which was great. I chose, and it was interesting this, because you could choose different modules within the degree, within the business management. And I chose everything about the individuals in the organization, human resource management, strategic intervention of humans, all these different elements that all involve human beings, because that was my background, and my interest lay there. And that was fascinating work. But then when I left that, I thought, well, I'm still on elbow crutches. I'm still in a wheelchair for long distance. Who's going to employ me, and in what capacity? So I thought, well, I'm going to have to find something niche. So I heard of a course on intellectual property. And here in Europe, there was 2 international courses, one in Munich in Germany and one in Alicante in Spain. And Alicante's warmer, so that won hands down.
That's funny. What a way to choose your future based on the weather.
It was warmer. But my wife and I went out there for a recce in I think it was in June, and we met the director of the courses, the 2 directors. One was from the States, and another one was a Spaniard who spoke perfect English. And they told us all about the curriculum. They said it's an international course, everything's in English, etc., etc. I thought, okay, why not? I'll sign up for this. So in the September, my wife and I went over to Spain to find a place to live near the university, and I started the course.
You said you went over there originally for a recce. Is that
Yeah, reconnaissance.
reconnaissance? Okay,
Just to check it out, really,
sure.
just to make sure everything was,
That's
fine and it suited our needs.
That's my American coming out. I'd never heard that term before.
No?
A recce.
Oh, okay.
No.
Now, should we use it short for reconnaissance?
Got it. I like
So
it.
obviously a military term, obviously.
Sure. So you did the reconnaissance, then you moved, and you started, and
Yeah, and everything was in Spanish.
oh, really? They said it was
Yeah.
in English, and then it was in Spanish.
Correct.
Wow.
So I spoke to the directors here. I said, "Oh, what's going on? You've advertised this in, I was the only English person on the course, by the way, as well. Everybody else was Spanish or from South America. So I thought this is a bit strange, and all the literature says in English, everything in English. And anyway, they said, look, we've been let down by a few lecturers. We've had to fill in at short notice, and we can only find Spanish speakers, et cetera, et cetera. But we are working to get more English speakers. I said, okay. So I gave it a couple of months, and nothing improved. And I said, look, if you don't get any English work within the next, any English lecturers within the next month, I'm leaving, because there's no point in me trying to learn intellectual property law in Spanish when I can't even say hello in Spanish. Really.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, we parted the ways after 3 months. I was paying for this, so I was like, well, this isn't right.
Sure. Yeah. Did you get your money back?
I did for that element, yeah. And they said, well, we'll only examine you on the elements you've understood. I said, well, I've not understood anything so far. So,
Wow.
So that won't be a very big exam, will it?
Yeah. That's wild.
So, but we liked it over there. So we stayed for a couple of years. And I managed to get some contracts, and I was doing some work remotely. And then the contracts required me to do a bit of traveling, which I was reluctant to do. So we came back to the UK. And I was in between a couple of contracts, and a friend of mine said one of his lecturers at the college was off sick or at short notice, and could I cover for a couple of classes for him? And I said, well, okay, sure. I haven't really taught business as such before. I mean, my education before was all in physical education, sports, etc. But I've got the degree, so I might as well, okay, use it. So I went to cover for some classes, and these were all 16 to 18-year-olds, and I loved it. It was really good, really enjoyable. And they just soaked the information up like sponges,
Sure.
So, cut a long story short, I ended up working for a college, ended up being a coordinator in the college and coordinating not just my own classes, but I had lots of other lecturers that worked under me. So in accounting and finance and marketing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And really enjoying life. It was good. But at the same time, I was also doing coaching on sports management courses for the university. So when they had sports science or sports management courses, I would teach the coaching modules for them and work with the students on those aspects of, to develop their coaching skills and bring them all up to speed. And we were having a ball, but we said, if we ever got a chance to go back to Spain, we would. And a job came up, I applied for it and got it. So we went out to Valencia, just a school north of Valencia, and I got there, and I ended up being the head of the business studies department and grew that. And then within 4 years, I became the head of the school, which you would call a principal, we would call a head teacher. And great, having a ball. Still using my coaching public speaking, coaching the staff, and teaching as well. So, having a whale of a time. And all our friends out there are all Spanish, and we learned the language, and great. And then I went to the opticians one day and for an eye test, and he said, "You've got a cataract in your left eye." I said, "Okay, what do I do with that then?" He said, "You need to see a specialist and get it removed." So did that, and the eyesight didn't improve in that one eye. So I thought, okay. So saw a number of specialists, ended up with a prognosis that I have this particular eye condition in both eyes, but it's only manifested in one, and it could manifest in the other. So I carried on work. I was still be able to manage with work and no problem. And then I think April 2015, I woke up and the other eye had become a problem as well. And that was tough.
Yeah. So now you're still using the crutches and in a wheelchair long distance. Is that at this time, right?
No, I'm sorry, I missed that. I'd recovered sufficiently there.
Oh, okay, that's great.
No problem there, walking, etc. Just have a lump of metal inside me that controls pain. It's what they call a neurostimulator.
Interesting. I was picturing you
And
then in a wheelchair, not be able to walk, and now you can't see. I'm like, man, that's rough.
no, I managed to recover from that sufficiently, so that was good. But I couldn't run or anything like that. But yeah, walking and things like that, fine. But
Sure,
yeah,
but yeah, losing. I mean, I think sight is something anybody that has it, I know we take for granted just because you've always had it. It's like we talked about with kids making friends. No one has to teach you to see, right? But when
this is true.
when it's gone, I'm sure that had to be scary and overwhelming, all sorts of emotions.
Yeah, everything. Every type of emotion you can imagine. And of course, it's the same for the doctors as well. When you go and see the doctors, you say, well, okay, well, what can you do about it? Because you expect them to fix you. And then, well, there's nothing we can do with this particular condition. And then you go for like 6-month appointments and they say the same each time. And then it becomes 12-month appointments. And now, well, these days it's 18-month appointments, just a revision, just to check you over, really, because they say there's no point in doing it more regular because there's nothing we can do for it.
Right. So at this point, how long ago was that?
2015.
Okay, so it's been 5 years, and at this point, still, can you see it all, or have you lost your sight completely?
Okay, so eyesight is, if you imagine a steamy window in a bathroom, for example, when the windows steam up.
Yeah.
That's what you can see. You can see movement through it, but you can't see any detail whatsoever in the left eye. And in the right eye, they call it counting fingers, where you can't see the charts that they give you because you just can't make out what anything is. But they go right close to your face, and they put fingers up, and they ask you how many fingers you can see. And I think they're about a foot away from your head when they're putting their fingers up there, and they're asking you how many fingers you can actually make out. And on a good day, because you don't get it, you get good days and not so good days. It depends on the light conditions as well. I maybe can see somebody's fingers 2 or 3. I mean, I have a nice big iMac computer, nice big 27-inch, and I still have to blow things up on that to see something.
Wow.
And be really close to it. But most things nowadays I use with a microphone and speech-to-text technology and text-to-speech technology.
Yeah, so talk about adversity. You had to completely figure out how to live your life without seeing. So how did you turn that
totally
one into
different
action?
Well, because when the left eye went, we knew from the doctors that the right eye could go, but we had no time scale or prognosis, which meant I could be medically retired for the second time. And I thought, well, I need to be prepared for this, just in case. So I started writing, and I'd never written before anything fiction-wise. And I started writing, and I did a young adults novel. I didn't think it was any good. I couldn't really tell whether it was marketable or not. So I sent it off for an appraisal, and it came back with some feedback, and I made some corrections to that, and then I put that out to the market as well. And then somebody said, well, because you're ex-military and you've got that background, why don't you write thrillers? So I wrote 3 thrillers, and that was great. But it's very isolating when all the work I've done previously was working with people.
Sure.
To now be in front of a computer with a microphone, me talking to it and the computer talking back to me, it just wasn't me to be doing that all day, every day. And then I did some coaching with couple of people, and I realized that, well, I can still coach, albeit in a different way, but I can still coach. And that's when I opened my coaching practice again. And, I haven't looked back, because I used to class myself as a deep listener. Now I class myself as a super deep listener, because my hearing ability is, improved so much. It's incredible.
Yeah, so why do you think that is? Is it just because you have to, and so you find yourself listening harder, and then you can hear more, or is it something else?
Yeah, I think it's that. I think it's because you're down on one of your senses, and you try and use the next sense that will actually get you the result that you would normally have had with the vision. So, for example, my wife and I were in a restaurant one day, and we were probably 7 or 8 tables back from the entrance, and it was quite busy in the restaurant. And I heard this voice come into the restaurant. I said to Leslie, our friends just walked in. And she said, how do you know? I said, I can hear him talking. She said, what, through all this noise? I said, yeah. I said, he's down there. And of course, she looked down, and there he was. And it was able to, using the hearing, to sort of tune out all the other elements and just pick up what you want to pick up. So when I'm working now, I mean, it's funny enough, we were talking to somebody, I was talking to somebody the other day about this, about getting, you know what it's like with coaching, Miles, you get these light bulb moments with your clients.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
and you can see their reaction, and you can see their eyes light up and everything else. But I don't see that.
Right.
So if they go into silent mode and have this eureka moment, my clues to that are they're changing their breathing pattern, they're changing their pitch of their language or their tone, and everything else, all from the auditory point of view. So I still get those moments, but they're an auditory moment.
Sure, it's not necessarily a light bulb moment. It's something else. It's a
Yeah, I haven't thought of the word yet.
yeah. That's what I was just trying to think of. What would you call that? It's not a light bulb. What else? That's interesting.
Yeah. So, but you have to adapt to life. I mean, don't get me wrong. And this is another anomaly, I think, where if we talk about resilience and we talk about life and adversity, is a lot of the experts will say, look, first of all, you're going to be in denial. That's one of the sort of process of dealing with this, because it's like dealing with grief. You've lost something, lost your independence, and you lost your sight and this sort of thing. And there's a process you go through, and I don't recall the process at the moment. One of the things is about denial. You just don't accept it. So you have to get to the point of acceptance. But then there's what I call conditional acceptance. Because yes, I accept that I've got this and I can't really do anything about it myself at this moment in time. And I always state when I write, or try to always state, that I'm currently sight impaired.
Sure. Yeah, I'm actually just looking at the email you sent me, and it does say I'm currently registered blind. So yeah, you haven't accepted it as a finality yet. Like there's still a chance.
No, absolutely not. No, that's my situation now as we speak. Tomorrow could be a different ball game.
And you know that from experience because of your leg, right? So
yeah, absolutely. So
that makes sense.
They're not always right. I mean, that surgeon who said get used to life like this because we can't do anything about the nerve. I've been walking for years, so I still have this pain management system inside me. But hey ho, it works, and I live life. But like from the eyesight point of view, although the traditional doctors, who are fantastic by the way, they've been absolutely brilliant all the way through, their hands are tied. They can't do anything from the traditional medicine point of view. So I go to alternative medical practitioners. So I'm at the moment going through something called bioresonance and trying that to see what effect that will have.
And so what's bioresonance?
Bioresonance is working with the electrical frequencies within the body. So they analyze the electrical frequencies you have in your body, and they end up with, in simplistic terms, you have, if you're out of balance, you have maybe more of one thing and less of something else. And there's lots of different elements to this within the frequencies within the body. So what they do is then they have these tools which emit and transmit electrical frequencies at you, towards you, in order to redress this and balance up those frequencies.
That's really interesting. I've not heard of that before. So
yeah, I mean, and it's more to it than that. But in layman's terms, in simplistic terms, that's what it's doing.
So immediately after one of these treatments, do you feel a difference? You can see a little bit better, or you just feel that balanced feeling? What's it like?
No, not yet, because I've got no idea how long this will take. But the first session was quite promising in that the first session I went to, and now my eyes have been like this since 2015, and I have to lubricate them every day. I have eye drops to lubricate them because they get extremely dry. That's part of the condition. And interestingly enough, on the first session, during the session, the right eye started to weep.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting.
Now, that continued, not continuously, but on and off for the next 4 to 5 days. Now, that was the sort of first type of movement in 5 years. So that's some kind of indication that something's happening, something's moving.
Right.
Not sure what direction yet, but it's moving.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. So we'll watch this space. We'll see how we go.
So I'm curious then, when you're coaching people, and I see on your website, it's all sorts of people, from entrepreneurs and athletes to, I think you had housewives on there, right? So anyone and everyone. I'm sure you have the ultimate trump card then, right? Like, hey, whatever your problems are, listen to my story. But do you think your adversity, the action you can now take is using your adversity as a sort of a benchmark for what other people are going through to show them that it can get worse but still get better? Is that a route you take?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very open and honest on my website. I put my bio on there, and I say, look, I'm not saying this for a sob story or anything. I'm just saying you can go through these things and you can come out the other end a better person, a stronger person. but you've got to have the right mindset to do that. And if you can't do it by yourself, get help. Whether it's a friend, a member of the family, a professional, maybe a coach. Doesn't have to be me. It can be, there's plenty of good coaches out there. And I always say you can, these days with technology, you can find the right coach, not the nearest coach. So, I work a lot on Zoom because that's extremely effective these days, and it's flexible for people, when they're on the move or whatever.
Sure.
And yeah, I think people do see that as a bit of a benchmark. And I've used it as a tool to say, look, here's an example. If I can do this, you can. I mean, I was speaking to a guy in Australia the other day on Facebook, yesterday, in fact, and he says he's technologically challenged. He says he's still trying to figure out Zoom and Skype and all these sort of things. I said, hey, no, there's no excuses here. If I'm sight impaired and I can do it, you can do it.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, okay, fair enough, he said.
There's no arguing that. Yeah, what's interesting, to me, you're a great example of what so I just recently wrote a book, and it's not published quite yet, but it will be soon.
Okay.
Almost in line with when this episode ends up airing. But I gave a TED Talk on the same topic here locally.
Right.
And, no pun intended here. We're talking about sight, but I call the idea unseen work.
Okay.
And I've identified different types. Generational, which is really the things that the generations before us, our parents, our grandparents, what they have done in their life sort of is the foundation that we build our lives on, and we can't see that, but we're the beneficiaries of it. And then there's active unseen work. So that's like when you went back to school and you say, I'm going to get this degree, you take the active steps to reach that goal. And then passive unseen work is the cross-fertilization of completely unrelated things that over time compound and add up and mix together to form something you never could have imagined. And as you've been talking to me, your entire story is such an excellent example of what I call passive unseen work, where you've turned all the adversity and compounded the actions to then architect this life that you have for yourself and to make something out of what most people would call, very dire circumstances.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'll give you an example there, Miles, because you've picked up on something really interesting. That when I had my second back operation, and I was, told you could be elbow crutches, etc., I was in the waiting room there with another guy who had the same operation, and he was a doctor, and he was sat there looking at the floor, didn't want to speak, was absolutely morose, and just, in a very dark place. He just didn't have that resilience, that mindset to move out of it at that point in time. He may well have done the next day, I don't know, but on that day when we were there together, that was his life, his situation. I'd already moved on and started re-education. I got my purpose. I'd taken action. I was going.
Right.
Now, what intrigued me after that day, I was driving home. Well, I was being driven home, actually.
Sure.
It got me thinking, how come I can have this attitude and mindset, and he's in that mindset, and we've just experienced the same thing?
Yeah, because we have no idea what led him to that moment. What examples he had been given by his family, what experience he had of what he was able to accomplish actively, and then how all that stuff passively brought him to that moment. It's all factors that we can't see about him, but definitely have an effect on how he reacts. Yeah.
And that really generated my first set of thoughts of adversity into action, because we're all different, but there are common threads in there that if I'm either working with somebody, like you said, who was a housewife but wants to do a project and really wants to get through things, but they've maybe never experienced anything like that before, but they need assistance and accountability as they're working through it. Or if it's a business person that's had really great record in sales and all of a sudden they dive, and because it may just be the case that the mindset they had before is not serving them well anymore, and they need to move on into a future mindset, and that's where we would work. Or, for example, I've just worked with 3 women who've just crossed the Atlantic on a challenge. They rowed the Atlantic in a really small boat and got the world record in 49 days for a trio of women. And working with people like that really sort of spurs you on, and you've got somebody there who's never rowed in their life, but they've agreed to do this because their purpose is to raise money for a charity that their father would have benefited from had they still be with us today. these elements. They've already got the motivation, they've already got the drive, they've already got the purpose. They just need to make sure they can turn it all into action.
Yeah, I love that.
And working with people like this in this way, what you just said about your book, and I can't wait to read this now, is perfect because it just explains and demonstrates everything we're all about.
Yeah, and for me, I feel like what I experience with this podcast, it must be similar to what you experience in coaching. Is I love having the conversations we're having right now with people, now I could say from all over the world, because it shows me, and I think all the people that listen, that we all are so similar. We can get in our heads negatively just as much as we can get into them positively, and think that we're the only people that have these thoughts or go through these experiences or have these worries or anxieties. The world's falling, all that stuff. But really, everyone goes through this in their own way, and that's okay. And when you realize that, and you can be vulnerable about it and share your story or listen to someone else's story and pick up a piece of wisdom that you can then put into action in your life, then it just makes the world less scary to go out and take that action, because you know that even if you have a setback, it doesn't have to be a complete failure.
No, and it doesn't. And this is where I use a particular quote, and it's come out of all the. And when I put it together, it's a very simple quote, but the thought behind it, the thought process behind it was, out of adversity comes into this action, as we've spoken about previously. And I say, yesterday's mindset's got you what you've got today. Craft a future mindset to get what you want tomorrow. Along those lines.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
because you can have your mindset, and you've got to where you've got, which is great, and you've got to a point. But if you're stuck and you're not moving forward, or you've not got what you want, then that mindset has served you well to get you where you are, but it's now redundant.
Right.
So there might be elements of that you can take forward with you, but there might be elements you need to sort of drop by the wayside. So there's nothing wrong with then looking, and the future starts now, to craft a future mindset. So you bring those elements that serve you well to the future with you, and then you add in new elements that will help you get what you want. And that's where the real work is.
Right. I love that. Yeah, that's a great quote for sure.
That's where the work is for anybody, no matter who you are and what level you're at. If you want to talk levels, whether you're the school janitor or you're the CEO, 100%. You've all got your own mindsets.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think that's a good spot to draw to an end here. I feel like that's a great sort of bow to put on this whole conversation. It's something that you've certainly achieved yourself, and I think it's something that the listeners can take with them and put into action, like we're talking about, in their lives. So I appreciate you sharing that and sharing your whole story with us. This has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
No, thank you for having me on. And what you're doing with your podcast is marvelous. I mean, some of the stories you've got on there are just phenomenal.
Thank you. Well, it's nice to know I have a fan in England now. You can help me help spread the word over in Europe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
And what's funny is I'll leave you on as I do the outro here, because I don't know if you caught on, but I say cheers at the end of every episode, which I never really thought of as a British thing or an English thing, but I just to me, it's cool, hey, cheers, like a toast to the next conversation. But when we were trying to get on Skype, you said cheers when we hung up, and it just made me smile. I was like, this is perfect. He could say cheers with me at the end.
Yeah, so. Yeah. Well, I use it a lot on the end of an email when I got to know a person, rather than the formality side of it. I very often just say cheers at the end of it.
All right. Well, hang tight with me. I'm going to wrap it up, and then we can say cheers together. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, everyone listening, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you joining in on my conversation with Paul, all the way from England. It's an exciting first for us here on Relish the Journey. So as always, if you got value from this episode, please share it with somebody that you think would also benefit from it. That's how we grow our audience and get to reach more people and spread this message of adversity into action. So follow us on social media at RTJ Podcast. And if you're interested on being the show or want to share some feedback with me, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at miles@rtjmedia.com. All right, ready? Here's where we go, Paul. Until next time, everybody, cheers.
Cheers.
All right.